Hello, you are watching episode 32 of Women of the Future. Today's title is somewhat catchy. It reads, Do Not Box Me In. I hope that you have been enjoying the series with us thus far. And today it is my pleasure to welcome you back to the studio where we will be chatting to Sister Denise on the subject. Sister Denise, hello.
Hello.
Tell me, do not box me in. That is a statement of independence, isn't it?
A statement, I think, not really independence in the negative sense, but it's really a statement that I have a right to my space. And if I am being pushed in to a tiny little box, that's really not nice.
Okay, so what does it mean as far as feelings are concerned, given the fact that the population watching you right now falls into the feminine category?
You know, in some cultures, they speak about women having to stay within the four walls, which is a box right there. And so it's an attitude that says that women should not be outside. They should only stay within the home. They should not have knowledge of the outside world. They should just restrict themselves to a very narrow world, and then they are good people. And one thing that I find really good for such situations, and many women are really taking advantage of it, is the internet. Because even if you're kept within the physical four walls, but the internet allows you to see what's happening, not just immediately outside your walls, but anywhere in the world. But then you have to be discerning and discriminating. Even so, it's an artificial freedom. And I think that women of the future will not be considered suitable only for the inside of the house. You know, one of the reasons why women are kept inside is because it's dangerous outside, and women are considered vulnerable, and they're even trained to be vulnerable. They're trained to be afraid of dogs. You don't actually have to be afraid of dogs. They're trained to be afraid of any man who's not a relative, but not all men are dangerous, you know. So I think it creates a very artificial and limiting framework for a woman. And then when you have people who really are wide in their spiritual space, you know, they really don't do well in prison, you know.
If an individual has been suppressed and boxed in her entire life, how does she begin to break down those walls? I assume that one has to break down your internal walls before breaking down any other walls. How does one start?
I think actually it can be quite difficult, because depending on the kind of walls you've been in and the environment there, but you just do not have the social skills, you do not have the street smarts to operate in another environment. And so when you go out there not knowing what's going on or how to do, you're going to be making silly mistakes all over the place. So I think when you come out, if you come out, it's very nice if you can be accompanied by somebody who does know their way around the outside world. It's similar to when you go and visit a new country or a new city. If you have somebody with you who knows everything, it's so much better, so much easier. You get where you want to go so much quicker. And I think that sometimes people don't realize that they need to offer that kind of accompaniment to someone who is just finding a way outside.
Okay, so Sister Denise, we have many women watching you who do not have the luxury of support, where they're all alone on many levels that count. and the ones that she can look to for support are also themselves boxed in and quite happy to stay within their prison walls. So what then? What if she doesn't have support? What happens to her?
Well, let's see if she's adventurous. Having a pioneering spirit, to just have the courage to go out there and say, whatever it is, let me trust in my fortune, my karma. It's always good to have the divine with you. That's a very, very good protection, support, accompaniment. And okay, even if you do get into a bit of trouble, you become experienced, you know, and I think it probably won't take so long. I think it really depends on the individual, you know. If you have a natural common sense and you're naturally able to relate to people, that's going to help you. But, you know, there are some people, if they've been isolated, that's very damaging for the spirit, and then you're just not so able to interact with people, or their ability, social skills and everything are very underdeveloped. So then it can be a bit of a journey, a bit of a difficult road to get yourself integrated into a world. And I think that you will be hesitant. Should I go back to the hell I know? Or should I go out to the hell I don't know? You know, the hell I know is always sort of easier than the hell I don't know.
Okay. Okay, Sister Denise, we have a number of women watching us today who have been denied the basics of education. A woman should never apologize for wanting to be educated, and by that I mean tertiary education. Your stance on that?
I think that perhaps a program like this is going to be useful for people, because we're talking about things that, again, I refer to the internet. You can get books on the internet, you can get articles, you can go out and explore the world of tertiary education from the angle of being self-educated, which I think is not a bad angle. You know, because tertiary education nowadays, it's a business, it costs a lot. There are many online courses, and nowadays more and more universities are doing everything online, you know. But to become knowledgeable and wise and cultured, well-read, you have to explore. And one of the good things about say classical intellectual books is they very often have references to other books in the back pages, and so that if you have a topic that you're interested in, any topic, just you can say Google it or whatever, look on a browser, and there you will find all kinds of opportunities. And maybe you have to be persevering, but I do think that this has offered a great horizon for people who are otherwise boxed in. And I do find that with the programs that we do, people from any part of the world stumble upon it, and they like it. So this is really good feedback for us. And I think that we also are talking to a group of people who are saying, talk to us, and that feels good.
That's good to know. Okay, so the journey, you say, from being boxed in to finding one's own feet in the real world is, or can be rather, a treacherous one. In terms of the qualities that a woman needs to explore, to become her true self, had she not been limited by the people around her, what does she need?
I think a little bit it depends. You know, sometimes people grow up until their marriage with a great deal of freedom, and then upon their marriage they start getting boxed in. And the person who's boxed in later in life has a lot more, you know, tools available to her, And it's, in a way, a lot more irritating to be boxed in, and so she's going to find all kinds of ways to get out of the box. And of course, nobody can box in your mind.
Yeah, I think that's very important for a woman to know, that as far as her thinking is concerned, no one has the jurisdiction to think in your mind except you.
You may sometimes have to live a double life. You know, you may have to look like you're boxed in without actually being boxed in mentally, and then the people around you will sort of never know who you are.
What does mental freedom mean?
If a person can really enjoy their mental freedom, they are free, you see. But the difficulty is that our mind is so caught up in our sense perceptions that if we're physically restricted, limited, and boxed in, it has an influence on the mind. So you have to be really creative to keep the mind free and keep yourself connected with the wider space. Yeah.
You mentioned the divine earlier in this episode. How does he assist with that? And the reason I'm asking this in this context, Sister Denise, is because a lot of people consider anything to do with religion or spirituality very limiting.
Well, I mean, I think that religious limitations because of institutions and organizations are and can be and historically have been extremely limiting. There's a wonderful French film, La Religieuse, which describes that. It's awful. But spirituality is quite different, because spirituality is not something you can institutionalize.
That's big, deep.
Well, spirituality means that your spirit is getting developed and your spirit is working with God, and who's going to box in God? You can't do that. And somebody who's with God is free because they're not limited by their body. So your body may be imprisoned somewhere, but your mind, your heart, you're taking power from God, you're taking inspiration from God, so you are beyond all of that. But it's a rare person who has the competency to cultivate that.
How does one go about doing that when you're doing it only in your mind?
Well, it depends on the details of your person, you know. If you're a powerful soul, if you're spiritually, you know, full anyway, then you can do that. But if you're kind of faltering and you don't know where you're going, then it's a whole lot more difficult, which is why there is such a thing as spiritual education, which can help a person to find their feet and find their wings and start moving. But a lot of people get into a way of doing things which is repetitive, and you get institutionalized if you're not careful. And so you have to really think at every step, where am I going? How am I going? Is this what I want to be doing? You know?
My mind is drawn to the hundreds of thousands of women who are victims in an abusive relationship. And as we know, victims in such a situation are faced with abuse on many levels. That is also a form of being boxed in. What is it, Sister Denise, that causes a woman to not find her freedom in a situation like that? Why do we choose to be small? I don't want to use the word victim. I want to use the word small.
When you're in an abusive relationship, it starts with one act of abuse. And if you're in your self-respect, you're going to stop it right there. But one of the problems is, even when you try and do that, you get no support, or you get negative support from even members of your own biological family. And so that makes you sort of feel small. So I think that you have to be very independent in your heart, in your mind, in your thinking, in your spirit, so that you do not use the word my for the abuser. You see, if it's my boyfriend, my husband, my lover, my whatever it is, you see, that ties you up and you become part of the performance. But when you detach yourself and say, you know, this person is behaving abominably, I'm not interested. Even if you may be physically in bondage, but mentally keep yourself away, then it changes the dynamic. When you take it in and take it on and become part of the dynamic, that it escalates.
I think the main problem, Sister Denise, is that which is going on in the inside of them rather than the external. And I'm thinking specifically about fear. Is it a question of you're afraid of what is on the outside, or is it that you've got to conquer your own demons? Where does the problem lie?
Well, what stops you walking out?
Yeah, that's a question I'm posing to whoever's watching who is in such a relationship.
What stops you walking out is, what will people think? This thought, what will people think? How will I manage? Where will I get money from? You know. So again, it's a question, do you like the hell that you're in or the unknown? So it's kind of in between. You're in between the devil and the deep blue sea, but you could just take a chance.
It takes a lot of internal work to get to this space, doesn't it?
It takes internal work, it takes guts. I think it takes more guts, and then I think the internal work may happen afterwards.
And how do you cough up guts?
Just take a risk.
Okay.
You take a leap.
Does that require action or thought? At which level are we speaking of now?
Well, it requires thought, it requires feeling, it requires ultimately action also, you see, because you have to plan for getting yourself free. And, you know, once you're outside that particular box, maybe you're in a bigger box, but maybe it's still a box.
What does that mean, Sister Denise?
Because you can be boxed in by social attitudes, by your incapacities, by your inexperience, and so on. So, I mean, I think in many ways there's boxes within boxes within boxes, and we keep having to think out of the box further and further out, which means you have to be very creative and very sure of yourself, because you may say, well, it's too hard. I'm out of the frying pan into the fire, you know, so how is that better, you might regret, you know. So you have to have guts, courage, you have to have your wits, you have to be inventive, you have to shore up so many different parts of yourself. And, you know, when you see these characteristics, it's talking about a person who's really strong internally, who can do that. So then the question arises, how do you get strong from weak? So where do you get your strength from? Of course, people usually say, oh, God, give me strength, you know, so start doing that. Start taking power. And I think that the more a person has exposure to how to meditate, how to draw power from the divine and translate that power into competencies, that is really going to help a person.
Tell us more about what you touched on earlier, is spiritual education. I like that a lot. One doesn't normally think of spirituality and education in the same sentence.
Well, there's a lot to know. You know, you need to know what your spirit is, what it looks like, where it lies, you know, how it operates with your body, how it gets weak, how it gets strong, what happens to it, what is the difference between an eternal soul and a temporary body, what are the components of spiritual qualities, what is the supreme, how do you make contact, where is the supreme, where are you, what are you, what's going on, why is it going on. You need to know about karma. There's a whole lot of material that you need to learn about. And where do you go for such information? Because it's not that easily accessible, although nowadays there's a lot of interest in spirituality, so you can find all kinds of books which give you a little bit here and a little bit there, and you can accumulate an amount. But you know, the gathering that I am part of, the gathering of Brahma kumaris, is specifically for educating oneself and one another spiritually. So we have texts, we have study, we have practices, we have all sorts of things that are also, you know, available on internet for anyone who's anywhere in the world who wants to learn about it. So that is there, yeah.
Okay, Sister Denise, I think that from everything that you said today, what is most obvious is that the boxes may have been constructed by people around her, but it's the woman who keeps the boxes alive in her mind.
Yes.
And in that sense, you're your own worst enemy, aren't you? By buying in to what other people have been selling you from a part of your life, or perhaps your entire life.
Yes, that's why I think the girl who has experienced greater freedom in her youth has more tools available than the one who's been boxed in from the get-go, you see. And she'll probably stay boxed in, and maybe she likes being boxed in.
There are those, yes. One cannot deny that.
Yeah. But I think it's important to have choice, you know, and to be able to have space. You know, in some communities where people are very boxed in, when a girl comes and gets married into an extended family where you are boxed in, there's no space for you at all, because all the space is taken up by the other women. And so you have a teeny tiny little space which you have to gradually sort of extend by pushing the other people's space back a bit. And so it becomes very competitive. So the setup among women in boxed-in spaces is quite hard, because there's a lot of compression, a lot of sort of artificial force that's applied, which is designed to create antagonism between the women, which is not a very good arrangement, I don't think. I mean, in some cases it's large enough to accommodate more and more people, but mostly it's restricted space.
Okay. We have to say goodbye to our viewers at this stage. Would you like to leave them with any thoughts before we say fare thee well?
Yeah, there is one thought that you can use. Even if you don't have physical space, or you don't have a place that you can consider your own space, because it is important for a woman to have her own private space, you can create a space in your mind. And you can say, okay, I live in the world of souls where I access in my mind. And you can actually go there mentally and actually sustain yourself from that inner mental privacy, which is going to help you when privacy is denied to you on a physical level.
That's very profound. So you're talking about mental privacy, aren't you? Yeah, okay, that's food for thought. Well, there you go. Do not box me in. If you find that you have been singing this song your entire life and no one's listening, well, fear no more, because you have been heard. Sister Denise has shared how one can free oneself, and even if it's not possible to free yourself on the external, it's possibly more powerful and more real, I think, to be able to free oneself internally. She has shared a number of tools as to how one can go about this, and what I particularly liked is her inclusion of the divine, a spiritual understanding in this journey, and also to understand that courage is needed to take this first step. So I think if one can face one's own demons, one can live a life of freedom, irrespective of what's going on the outside. Thank you for joining us, and I do wish you a life of freedom. Take care. Goodbye.